Hello. It's been a minute. Couple things before we get started. It's been a few weeks since I felt like getting back on camera again after Kix's passing, but with the major starting up next week, I figured it was a pretty good time to start getting back into making some videos. The one that I did talking about Kix got a lot of positive reception. There were a lot of people sharing some very heartwarming stories and messages in the comments, and there are a lot of things that I do want to talk about regarding him and the way that we were able to finish up the North American League all live together in a studio for the end of Stage 3, but I'm going to save those details for a stream that I'll do at some point in the future if you want to hear extended details on a whole bunch of stuff regarding that. The other thing is that Jesse and I are bringing back the post-show. You guys seem to really like it for the Sixth Invitational. We loved producing it, so it's coming back for Sweden. Same drill as last time. Right after play days are over, we go live with the recording on Twitch, and then it gets posted here to YouTube afterward. We've made a couple of adjustments to it since May, though nothing drastic. It'll still be review, analysis, recaps, and the whole 9 yards, so hopefully we'll see you there starting on Monday. But speaking of this major, it's coming up next week. And I'm not going and I'm sad. I really retired Pengu and then they decided to give him a job over me. I guess turnabout's fair play. This is just karma. But it is happening in just a few short days. And before we get into predictions, I did want to talk about storylines for every team. We did a video back from Mexico talking about the top 5 storylines overall, just the ones that I thought were coolest, but it felt kind of criminal to only focus on a few because every team going to a major has some kind of narrative behind them. I'm a film guy. I can't really help my natural inclination to find plot lines and everything. Like, I watched Dune earlier this week and I had to turn the analytical part of my brain off to just be able to enjoy the film. Like, it was hard. Just like I was watching that film. Dune is really good. Go watch it in Dolby if you can.
There is no call.
We'll go in alphabetical order and talk about the storylines I see for each team heading into Sweden, which might be helpful if you're trying to look for a team to root for but don't necessarily know where to begin. And keep in mind there might be some that I just don't mention straight up, so if that's the case, feel free to leave your favorite storyline below in the comments. First up, BDS. This was just an excuse to talk about BDS first. On paper, BDS is one of my favorite teams to win the major. They are one of the best teams here, and that's now been backed up by the fact that they have a missing piece of the puzzle that didn't exist on their team before. A coach. Hard to believe, right? They went literally since the formation of this roster over 2.5 years ago without a coach, then brought Bios in, who used to do work for Penta and Ascend, and now he's coming in to be that support staff puzzle that they didn't have because they've been rocking with a manager and an analyst for most of their runtime. And they went undefeated in Stage 3 with him on the team even before he was announced, so it's already a pretty good sign of things to come. And because they were the team that I said I was going to stop giving grace to if they weren't able to win something, this was the one thing that they were missing. So I'm going to hope that this gives them a buff, especially when they play on LAN. For the Chiefs, it's kind of multi-pronged. It's the org's first appearance at an international LAN event, the first time an Australian team's been able to go to a Premier Siege event since the Sixth Invitational 2020. That's where Wildcard couldn't attend, and Knights obviously weren't able to make it to Mexico. And this is a little bit more niche, but this is the start of the Ethan Revenge Tour. He's an old mainstay member of the ANZ OCE region. He played for the Atletico Orglis initial Wildcard roster, took a pretty considerable break from the game, and now he's coming back, and his first stage back in Rainbow Six, he's already going to a major. I like rooting for teams that are usually considered underdogs. I'm really happy that we have an Australian team back in the scene. So let's see if this combination of new blood plus a grizzled veteran who's been to a couple of LANs before can actually make some noise in their group. Damwon Kia, God, Monty really got me saying it that way, didn't he? Look, I'm literally not going to argue with that man's pronunciation, so they are Damwon Kia from now on. Thank you, Monty. These guys will probably be fan favorites. They beat NIP twice, they beat G2 twice in Mexico, they were the only APAC team to make it out of their group in Mexico, and they're technically the highest performing Korean team in Siege because they made it to a quarterfinal of a major, and no other Korean team had been able to do that before. Problem is, I think they're stuck in the group of death, so if they do get eliminated, which I'm kind of assuming they will be, there's probably going to be a lot of broken hearts after Sweden is done. For DARKZERO, this is the start of the Canadian comeback. The man sat out for 2 stages of Siege this year, then came back in Stage 3, and like Ethan, he's also going back to a major. Admittedly, I didn't think DARKZERO was going to be going to Sweden in the first place. I just kind of assumed it was going to be TSM, but regardless of which of those 2 teams it would be, they're kind of coming in as the weakest North American team overall with a lot of things to show. So even if for some reason they don't manage to make it far in Sweden, it's probably not the end of the world because this team is still trying to reform a lot of how it works around a new IGL. So he is the story here. It's also going to be really really good to see him back in an international LAN environment. Seeing him when he was on stage in the NAL was one thing, but when he's really back in that moment, it's going to be a sight to see. For FaZe Clan, the story is that they missed a Premier Siege event for the first time in over 3 years when they couldn't qualify for Mexico, which I don't think is a streak any other team had aside from them. So you can bet that these guys are going to be chomping at the bit to reclaim some of that lost ground. They haven't won a major or substantial international title under FaZe ever. They now have an additional support staff piece with an analyst that should be able to help them break down maps and kind of split up the back-end workload a little bit more. This could be FaZe Clan's greatest chance yet to win something big. For their BR6 counterparts in FURIA, they're introducing, so to speak, a new superstar into the mix. And that's Fantasy. Obviously, he's not someone who you're a stranger to if you watched SI or Mexico or any of BR6, but he is somebody that just tied Palu for a brand new overall stage kill record in Stage 3 at 113. Not only is he sharing that with a legend, but he's up there in the scoreboard above literally everybody else. He had a lot of clutch and highlight plays that got him to that moment. So even if FURIA as a whole doesn't do good in Sweden, a lot of the attention is going to be on Fantasy. They didn't have the greatest Stage 3, they may not have the best major, but a lot of that attention is going to be given to this guy because of what he was able to do, and he turned a lot of heads while he was doing it. No matter what happens with FURIA, that man has upped his stock considerably. For INVICTUS, regrettably, the story around them is a player not being able to attend. Hysterix himself has confirmed on Twitter that he won't be able to attend with the rest of his team to Sweden because he still has some national service to complete in Singapore and he doesn't have any leave left with which he might be able to go. As far as I'm aware, he used all that up when he went to Mexico, which would mean that their coach Gig is playing instead. But unfortunately, I do think that INVICTUS is probably going to be the sacrificial lamb of the whole major and might be an opportunity for everyone else in their group to farm some free points and see if that fight for the top gets even closer because INVICTUS might not be able to compete at full strength. I hate to say it, but them even winning a game in the group that they're playing in may be an accomplishment given what we've seen TSM when they were gimped in Mexico and what they weren't able to do. It's just kind of a guess, but unfortunately for the Singaporeans, that's just kind of the situation they're in. For Ninjas in Pajamas, God, this one's just so hard. They need to essentially forget that Mexico ever happened. They allowed emotions to get the best of them. They lost some pivotal group stage matches despite being early favorites. And now they're getting memed on for that interview they did where they were saying new recoil made us struggle. As far as I'm concerned, that isn't a valid excuse for world champions and they need to be better. The story for Oxygen Esports, congratulations on the rebrand, by the way. That thing looks way better than the knockoff NXT championship belt that you were running with before. When these guys are on, they're just on. Stage 1 and SI were great. Stage 2 was a wash. Stage 3 looks like a very clear reinvention of what their whole team dynamic looks like. But the key is making sure that they aren't found out as quickly as they were during Stage 2, because that's how they fell off. So keeping things fresh going into the first time they've played internationally since the Six Invitational is going to be a massive deal to make sure that they don't get found out while they're literally sitting across from their opponents. For Rogue, it's the Curse. And if you don't know what the Curse is, let me explain. These guys have a history at Premier LAN events of getting either first rounded or going out way earlier than expected, and that isn't something that's going to go away just because the pandemic meant that they couldn't attend any of those events. Like, it doesn't sideline the Curse. These guys as Giants got knocked out by Airwolf, they were knocked out first in their group at SI 2020, and then since then they've had like either top 4 success or almost bottom 2, bottom 3 problems over the course of the EUL. It's been a struggle. And just to make sure that I'm not hopping on the hopium train for any reason for these guys, until they prove otherwise, I'm simply not going to pick them to win anything. They have everything to prove in a very tough setting, especially with a tough group. So that's it. Break the Curse. Let's see where you can go from there. Or don't, in which case that's even funnier. For SANDBOX Gaming, this is all about redemption from the Six Invitational. You might know these guys as Cloud9 or Mantis FPS, but as Cloud9, they were usually pretty consistent in online regional play. They went to 2 straight online majors against Giants, they won 1, they lost 1, then they went to the Invitational, but they clearly weren't at their best form. That bad performance at SI led to them being 7th place, I think, overall in APAC North for Stage 2, and that entire saga culminated when Cloud9 dropped them outright. That's a really bad snowball effect, and honestly, I wouldn't blame them if for some reason they weren't able to bounce back. But They did. They won Stage 3 of APAC North as Mantis FPS, and coming into the Sweden Major, they now have a new org in SANDBOX Gaming, which will take a little bit to remember the name, but it's still the same guys. The Sonics didn't go into Mexico properly, so the thing for them is going to be adapting from their learner's mentality when they were in Mexico and turning their success in the NAL into something way more substantial for an international context. They said that their prep wasn't any different from their NAL prep, and as a result, they talked a lot of smack and then got smacked for every single game except one when they were in Mexico. Their NAL formula seems pretty stacked, and they have been in the top 3 for every stage this year, and the cool part about this is they already understand their prep shortcomings. It's all about adaptations, one step at a time kind of thing, and this is absolutely the team that can dominate given the circumstances are right for them. They just have to make the circumstances right for them. For Space Station, I wrote this in the script as extreme strength also equals extreme crashes. What I mean by that is this is a team that's fantastic in the North American League, but I do kind of consider the way that they went out in Mexico to be really disastrous. They were the best NAL team of the year in spite of their Stage 1 and their SI runs. Skies looks like he fits seamlessly into this team. Hot and Cold has been the highlight player, and I'll reiterate what I said on the NAL. This has the potential to be the best SSG that's ever existed, but they're gonna need to make a deeper run at an international LAN in order to really prove that point. It starts with getting out of groups in Sweden and then winning a semifinal game, or at the very least playing more halves than they did against Empire in Mexico. And the cool part about this is I absolutely have trust that they can do it. They are fully capable of it, but just go show me, boys, please. But if you don't, I get the trash talk like and more, so it still counts. For Empire, this storyline doesn't really exist in Siege just because it hasn't been that big of a focal point, but it's about continuing CIS dominance. This is the best team from that region overall that's essentially ever existed, what with guys like Virtus Pro and Hellraisers never really being able to meet up to the same standard. They haven't really stumbled since Stage 1 of this year, which means they've been top of the Europe pile for the past 6 months, and making it to the Grand Finals in Mexico is just more proof of that. But even though they lost that game, I don't even think it puts that much of a damper on their skill level overall. And even though we've had a whole bunch of players in Rainbow Six come from Germany or France or the UK, if they were able to get another tournament win under their belts at some point in the next, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, then they may prove that Russia, Ukraine, the whole of the CIS is just the single greatest machine from which you can spawn really good players in almost any competitive game. Valorant, Dota, Counter-Strike, all of them have had champions come from that region, and Rainbow Six just could be next up. They were one map away from doing it in Mexico, but just barely fell short. But they lost that grand final to Team 1, and even though Team 1 won that major, somehow I don't really feel like they're as respected as they could be. I think a majority of people, maybe like NA or EU fans primarily, will still look to FAZE or Liquid or NIP as being better Brazilian teams overall, but Team 1 won a major and they still aren't really mainstays yet. I don't expect them to win Sweden because I don't really think that magic from Mexico is something you can duplicate again. I also could be proven completely wrong, but it's a case where they still have a long way to go towards proving the last remaining doubters wrong and that they're still a force to be reckoned with. And the only thing you really have to do in Sweden is just get a decent placement with international teams to make it seem like you're capable of hanging with the rest of the pack. You don't have to win, just place well, and then hopefully that stigma or the doubts that people still have about this team will begin to wane off eventually. And finally, to wrap up this list, Team Vitality. This is their first premier event since 2018 in Paris, and their first interregional LAN since 2019, which I think was DreamHack Valencia? The teams from then to now look completely different, with the only exception being Bibu, because he is stuck with this roster through thick and thin in every iteration, from French to the super team to back to the French. This man's been on a wild ride. I don't have any expectations for Vitality, other than that they haven't really done that well in EUL overall for 2021, so they could surprise or they could fall completely flat, and they don't really have that much to lose because this is the first time they've been back at competition like this in literally years. They could be next up for French supremacy next to BDS if they play their cards right, but considering the only other French competition in the EUL is Heroic and they just got relegated, it may not be saying very much. Overall, this is an interesting event because a lot of the heavy hitters like your TSMs or your Team Liquids, they're not in this event, which kind of sucks for those of us who've been wanting them to do well for a while, but this might be an opportunity for some new blood to kind of take center stage, or for somebody else who's been fighting for a major championship for a long time to finally win a big one. Was there any other storyline in here that you thought was interesting to mention? Like I said, leave them below in the comments, and then do me a couple of favors. First, hit up Twitch, because that's where the post show is going to be, and hit up Twitter, because that's not only where the post show is going to be posted, but I'm also running a giveaway for a Valkyrie set. If you want to go win that, head over to Twitter and enter. It's super easy. You just got to like and retweet a thing. And then aside from that, we'll do the predictions video, and then we'll see you for the post show. So yeah, that's all I got. I've been out of YouTube for a long time, so apologies if I'm rusty. I'll see you later. Peace.